All right, you good to go, my man?
Yeah, brother.
Welcome back to the Open Up Podcast, everyone, to episode 68 with Slade Moore, or as he's known in Perth, Earlybird MC.
Hello, beautiful people. How are you going out there?
My man.
Thanks for having me on, Lockie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Bro, I'm stoked. For anyone who doesn't know, this was one of my spiritual guides while I was at Wheatstone experiencing depression. So super grateful to have had you. And you're actually the first person to introduce me to DMT.
That's right. We did have a little ceremony in our donga up north, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
First question straight off the bat, brother, a little bit deep. How would you describe yourself, or the way that you view yourself as a man and or human?
Well, from my lens, the way I would describe myself, idealistically, or, because my analytical brain could break this down into so many segments. So I guess idealistically, I would describe myself as a optimistic, honest, genuine, kind of compassionate, romantic individual. And I use romantic in a broader sense, not just like a general kind of sense, but a romanticism just about life. Yeah. And the way that we undertake things from a romantic nature. I like the trees, the sky, my studio, my house, everything, my friends, my family, try to be a genuine character. And I guess that's the ideal way that I would present myself.
That's cool, man.
If I had the opportunity.
So like that romanticism, is it sort of similar to curiosity and gratefulness, or?
Yeah, well, I guess, curiosity and gratefulness can be romanticized, can't it? So I think that it is a curiosity that drives a romantic kind of mindset. Yep. Because it's a questioning of, what you're engaging with, in a way of trying to figure out what it's about, what's behind it, where it comes from. How do I feel about this? How do other people feel about this?
Yep.
And, how to engage with it in the most positive way, uplifting way, to be able to, create something beautiful, like an energy.
Yep.
Yeah. So, being grateful and optimistic is definitely something I try to cultivate a lot.
Cool.
But it's a full-time job. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest lessons I learned from you at Wheatstone while we're doing a 4-1 roster, is that I remember having this conversation to you when we were up in the pipes, and it was like 45 degrees, had fucking harness and tools on, and it was just boiling hot, and everyone was hating working. And I asked you how you stayed so mindful and so cheerful, and it was like, bro, this is my retreat, this is my getaway, this is where I get to practice mindfulness and being present. And that fucking blew my mind, man. Entirely changed the way that I viewed every situation that I've been in since then.
Yeah, that was an interesting situation as well, because I think at that moment I was going through a lot at home, like with relationships. So the opportunity to escape my life situation, even though it was to quite a coarse and harsh environment, it did give that opportunity to kind of separate from, the constructs that we have about our life situation. But when it comes to FIFO and challenging scenarios, I've always tried to hold a mindset that it's like, obviously we get to choose how we, view each situation. And when it comes to FIFO and that, even when I first started doing 4-1s back in 2014, I went on site and I was like, all right, I'm not going to let this break me. This is resilience training.
Yeah.
So trying to hold that mindset of, we are our own creators of our own kind of mindset, and that all we have to do is keep cultivating that attitude of resilience, and eventually it pays off. It's no easy quick fix.
Yeah, that's cool, man. Yeah. Well, 2014 to whenever you finished, that's a long time and a lot of practice.
It was a long, arduous journey, and it's still nowhere from over. And I am grateful for the conversations that we shared in that scaffold as well, because I think those conversations is what made it so much more possible to be able to maintain those mindsets. Yep. If it wasn't for the few people around that we can connect with on that level, you really start reaching for, support and guidance and comfort in other avenues that, might not be so good for the direction that you're trying to go in.
That's a good point. Yeah. So the story you're going to share pretty much, I guess it's all spawned from childhood. So if you're comfortable, brother, just walk us through everything from your childhood.
So, yeah, it's been a roller coaster ride. And I often like to use a metaphor about my childhood, my adolescence, and my, pubescence, all the way up into adulthood, has been like excuse me, I'll try not to swear too much. Right. I can be partial to the cussing. I think it's a genuine kind of expression of what you're feeling. So anyway, my metaphor is like being inside a pinball machine, right? But this pinball machine, it's the journey of life. Some people, they have, gifted with in this lifetime to have, like a secure, safe journey so they can travel through one point to another, and they learn everything along the way in positive, ways. But I feel like the metaphor I used for mine was being inside a pinball machine and then just crashing into everything. Bang, 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 all the way through life. From a kid, I just remember just being in trouble all the time, getting disciplined. I was bullied at school, picked on a lot, could learn very well, or was never really good at sports, didn't really have any friends, So there was just like this little me that was going through this life and just going bang, 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 just crashing into everything, trying to figure out what was going on. And it was just a process of learning everything the hard way, I guess. So it starts like my parents were never together.
Okay.
So I guess, that it's a double-edged sword, if you were in your parents were together when you were growing up and then all of a sudden they were divorced, that could be quite traumatic. Me, I didn't have that problem. When I was born, my parents were never together. So I don't remember them ever being together. They were always there.
Yeah.
My dad was, in Sydney a couple of hours away, and I lived with my mum, and, that was character building, just being with my mum and my sister. So I was raised by like a female dominant household. So I guess, and that kind of, really drilled into me a lot of the ethics I have about chauvinism and, respecting women and trying to be a gentleman, and a lot of romanticism, I guess, about that as well, as being raised predominantly by women in the first half of my life. And, that was just an interesting time because, we were out in the country and didn't have many resources at our disposal. And I was just a big energy.
Yep.
Big, untamed, unbridled energy that society just didn't know how to handle. Neither did my parents or my school or anything. So it was just like, it was one of those things, just crash, 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 crashing through life with this big ball of energy and not knowing how to channel it properly or use it in positive ways.
Yeah.
As far as learning and any of that kind of stuff goes. So school was never my forte. Got kicked out really young. So I was only just turned 14 when I left school.
Okay.
Had a suspension for stealing and vandalism. I was, got introduced to drugs and alcohol really young as well, with the help of my community, and my parents. Yeah. So I thank them for that in a lot of ways because, I've always looked up to my parents for a lot of, inspiration as far as, like my mom in particular for my spiritual kind of roots because she was always grounded in tarot cards and, you know, yeah, the spirit realm. And a lot of that kind of philosophy comes from my mum. But then my dad, he was a big thinker and you know, like a kind of a pioneering individual. So got a lot of my personal philosophies about life from him, and a lot of the ethics that I hold dear I gained from them. But also some of the most critical things that my parents taught me was what I didn't want to be when I grew up.
Okay, how so?
Yeah, so I think fundamentally, I always thought, okay, so I don't want to be like that when I grow up.
Like what?
So doing the same things over and over again, suffering the same cycles in life over and over again, and never experiencing anything kind of new.
Okay.
So like from a spiritual perspective, having complete faith in the divinity and fate that if you do well, if you treat others right, if you be kind, if you're constantly giving, sharing, nurturing, that something's going to come back.
Yeah.
You know, we have this faith, there's this philosophy about spirituality, and it's a romanticism that, you know, if you just be kind and if you be good and, you know, like spread your arms to everyone and invite all this kindness in, that eventually it's going to come back and you'll live a nice, happy life. But from what I've experienced watching my parents is that's just not the case. You know, you could be the most spiritual, profoundly connected, clairvoyant, intuitive, you know, spiritualist, but if you don't have some kind of balance between surrendering to the divine and being a master of your own fate and having the courage to be able to take decisive action and make critical decisions in your life, you're not going to be able to achieve certain things.
Yeah, that's a hugely important point, because I think, especially with books and videos, movies like The Secret, where they teach, you know, to attract what you want, to visualize it and stuff. But if you're putting that out, people are just going to keep taking. It's up to you to take action to make something happen, and by nurturing, by giving to those people, you create the networks and you create that trust in those relationships for them to then give you something when they see you taking action.
Yeah. And building the trust, building the networks, building the relationships, you know, it's a process of, you know, putting yourself first sometimes.
Yeah.
Because I think, yeah, from a holistic kind of spiritual perspective, it can be sometimes to the detriment of the individual to put other people first all the time.
Yeah.
So some would call it selfless, and you know it probably is in a lot of ways. But I think that from my experiences after all of this, it's taught me that we as individuals can't help anyone else until we can help ourselves first.
Yeah.
So that's given me the courage to be able to say no to people, to be able to work in oil and gas for so many years, because even though that was like an ethical kind of moral dilemma for myself in some ways, you know, with the impact on the environment and all that kind of stuff and my mental state. So yeah, to be able, the ability to have the courage to put yourself first and make critical decisions.
Yeah, I think for the most part, people who do provide, they give, without taking back, have the sense of, I don't actually deserve it. And so for me to be validated, for me to feel enough, I need to be needed by providing so much.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense. So then it becomes an obsession or an addiction almost. It's like an addictive mindset.
Yeah. And so that's pretty much what you're here to share. That's like the first one you want to share. And you spoke beforehand about your parents having this addiction, although they have all these qualities that you admire and that you're glad that you took on. They did have this sort of tendency to, I guess, have this addiction.
Yeah. So it's a divine paradox. There's always a divine paradox. And I think that, you know, with my parents and that generation, it was so normal just to be smoking pot all the time, drinking all the time, taking acid, you know.
Yeah.
Just normal stuff for people to do, you know. So when I grew up, I can't remember the first time my dad told me stories about him and his mates taking acid and, you know, experimenting with psychedelics. Probably about the same time I started smoking weed, which was about 12, 13, maybe.
Yep.
Yeah.
Shit, man.
So the first time I ever tried pot, so this is like the first time I probably ever said this in a public domain, I would have been year 4. So what's year 4? Like 7 or 8 years old?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. And, you know, it was out in my house. You know, I saw mum doing it. You know, I'm a fast learner. So there's this thing's out and there's stuff's out on the table. She's not there. I'm like, oh, cool. I'm just going to try this now. Fucking tried smoking bongs when I was like 8 years old for the first time. And, you know, I just remember coughing a lot, but I don't really remember getting high. But I was always around this. So it was something that was conditioned into my belief system to be, you know, what people are supposed to do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We're supposed to drink a lot. We're supposed to smoke a lot. We're supposed to swear a lot. We're supposed to hang out at pubs and bars and, you know, struggle for a living, basically.
Cool. So how did that eventuate for you moving forward?
So moving forward, I guess the pinball machine of life that I just kept bouncing through helped me kind of realize what I did and didn't want in my life. So, yeah, and learning about the different facets of addiction has been a big kind of paradigm shift for me to be able to try and steer my life in a new direction.
Yeah.
Because, you know, when we talk about addiction, it can, you know, as we're all aware, cover a lot of things, you know, like a broad array of substances, activities, and, you know, like people or attitudes or belief systems or mindsets. You know, I feel like that they're all interconnected in this big kind of web of, you know, addiction with this umbrella kind of term. And it's been the process of figuring out why you get addicted to something and then how that the actual function of that addiction keeps you stuck in a cycle.
Yep. So for you, what was that cycle and when did it start?
Okay, so the cycle of addiction started for me probably when I was a kid with BMX, because that was my first ever passion in life.
Yep. That
I just used to ride BMX, and I would ride and ride and ride and ride. And, you know, in the same context, it became an obsession. And that's all I ever did, all I talked about, all I ever wanted to do was BMX. And, you know, I used to go out riding and ride as hard as I could, as fast as I could, crash, hurt myself. And I got to a point where if I wasn't crashing and I wasn't hurting myself, then I wasn't satisfied. Okay. So then I became addicted to this pain. You know, it became like a satisfying feeling of pain in a sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and that's like a negative, I just wrote a little piece about negative motivators and negative drivers, and that's like the tortured artist, like the rapper or the creative who feels like they have to torture themselves or suffer to create true, like, quality art.
Yeah.
And so if you're BMXing, if you're having a lot of fun, you're feeling successful and you hurt yourself, and then you tie that feeling of being hurt to success, then you're always going to revert back to needing that feeling or that emotion to feel like you've achieved or been successful.
Yeah. So I feel like that's when addiction really started for me in my life, before it turned into substance abuse or, obsessing about people and relationships and stuff like that.
That's good self-awareness, man.
Yeah. So, and it was from there that it kind of grew. And then I started getting older, and then, all my life was just BMX, and then extreme sports, and like crashing and hurting myself, and just being on the edge, on the fringe, pushing boundaries, pushing limits. I think that was another thing that I became obsessive with, was pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable and what was, okay. And then eventually getting into high school, the 1 year that I did in high school, year 7. So go high school education. And then started getting into smoking pot a lot more, like regularly. And then I guess you could say that definitely became an addiction and a controlling substance of my life and my attitude and my mindset that has huge ramifications on the person that I am now, today, after all those experiences. Yeah.
Do you remember how you felt like when you were craving it?
Yeah. So it becomes all-encompassing and completely delusionary. And I still experience bouts of this today. So fully confessed, haven't fully quit smoking pot to this day. I still dabble in it.
And I don't feel like you need to.
Yeah, but it's an ongoing process. And the more I learn about it, the more I learn about myself, the more I realize that it's nothing external, that this whole complication is all internal.
Yeah.
And so getting back to your question was, yeah. What was the question again?
Oh, fuck, I have no idea.
All right. Was running with that tangent about short-term memory loss. There you go. Another reason why you shouldn't smoke pot, ladies and gentlemen.
So, like, I got another question. For me, when I was addicted to, I guess, ecstasy or addicted to alcohol, I tied ecstasy in with the feeling of having a good time and like life being exciting, and then I tied alcohol into the feeling of being relaxed. Do you have an idea of what sort of emotional feeling you lumped, or what sort of gratification you got from smoking weed or smoking pot?
Yeah, so over the years and over the sessions with my therapist, it's helped me wash away a lot of layers and get to kind of that under the core beliefs about myself. And one of the main core beliefs that I've been using pot to mask my whole life was the fact that I'm just not good enough.
Okay.
The fact that I'm not enough myself, just the way I am.
Yep.
So I need to smoke some pot to make me seem cooler to other people, or smoke some pot to be able to relax and deal with the situation, or to be able to focus, be creative, be likable, or in different situations. So it was using it to cover up my own sense of lack about myself.
So just to fit in, pretty much.
Yeah, and to cover up a lot of the scars from my past about rejection and shame as well.
Yeah.
From women that came in, adolescent life. And I think a lot of it stems back to my early childhood as well, with the women that I was kind of raised by. Maybe there was some shame and reject issues that kind of came out of that as well. So I think that using substances, well, I don't know. I'm still trying to tap into my genetic memory to be able to uncover the actual...
Oh, so you mean like hereditary shame?
I mean, from when I was an adolescent, like a young child.
Yeah.
So in a house with an abusing parent, that's, like drunk and high all the time, whatever, you can only imagine what needs of a young child may have been left by the wayside.
Okay.
Yeah. So I can only assume that some of the trauma that I'm still trying to work through comes from that early childhood, maybe neglect or rejection, kind of shame issues, and as well as the fact of just being, like super hyperactive and dyslexic, kind of dysfunctional child, led to lots of shame about who I am as a person, not being able to fit in, not having any friends, being bullied, being, all of these things that, we become more mindful of in later life leave just impressions on us in those impressionable years.
Yeah. And especially like to lump on top of all of that, you got kicked out of school, which pretty much says, sorry, man, but you don't fit in this environment, so you're not welcome here. And that's hard for a kid at that age to take, especially when you're unsure, uncertain of how to, I guess, control that bundle of energy that you are at that point.
Yeah. And then it just comes back to the shaming of self again. So not giving the tools to be able to learn how we best function individually as people, I think in school. So yeah, one of my things that I talk about a lot in my music is how school could be so much more beneficial if it gave students the opportunity to actually learn about what their innate kind of gifts are and then have them nurtured rather than having a short list of options to conform to. Because I feel like I never did conformity very well, or...
and it's hard to conform to a style of learning that doesn't suit the way that you best learn.
Exactly.
Like you're always going to have resistance if it doesn't come natural for you, if it's like something you have to work at a lot harder than everyone else.
Yeah, that's right. In some ways, and in other ways it was different because, because of that big energy, I was an extremely fast learner, but extremely short attention span. Yep. So I could pick things up really quickly, but then just get bored and forget about it. And then all of a sudden, I'm a terrible student. So I guess dealing with those like uncontrollable kind of genetic parts of who I was as a person, and then dealing with the shame of not being the same as everyone else or not fitting in, and then also having a dysfunctional kind of the home life that, let a lot of this stuff to get turned inwards on myself. So I think that one of the things that we tend to do if we don't have a release for these kind of this shame and this negativity is we turn around and we put all the blame on ourselves. Like, oh, if I'm just a terrible person, or I can't do this, I can't fit in, I have no friends, no one likes me, I hate myself, blah, blah, blah. Self-loathing comes in, and then, self-sabotage, self-destructive behaviors, and then obviously, to the extreme cases of self-harming and all that kind of stuff that comes along with it.
Were you ever comfortable talking to your mum about anything that you were going through, anything you were thinking or feeling?
Well, it's taken a long, 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 long time to be able to open up to my mum properly because, God forbid that she ever sees this, but she had a lot of mental issues from my perspective when we were growing up. So she wasn't very mentally stable and, emotional and crazy and screaming and yelling and all the time and fighting. And so I was always the one that had to listen to my mum.
Yeah.
So I didn't really get a chance. I didn't have a platform to be heard, really, that I feel in any kind of, substantial kind of way.
Okay.
So it was only in a lot later life, like in the recent years, that I sat down to my mum and I said, Mum, you need to listen and you need to hear me when I'm speaking to you. This is how I need to be heard. This is what I need from you as an adult. You need to be my parent now. Okay, it's time. I'm an adult now. I need to teach you how to be my parent. So that came to that point. Whereas the other way around, it was always, I just was calm and, collected. When mum and my sister were fighting, she was dumping all her emotional stuff on me. I kind of wore all that. I don't really remember ever being able to confide in her in a very meaningful kind of ways.
Okay. I think like from what you're saying, I can understand why you have like this, where you had this distrust of women if you felt like you were the scapegoat all the time.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's definitely
very easy to convince yourself that you deserve it if that's consistently what you're being given by the person that's supposed to love you the most.
Mm. Yeah. So, and I know she loves me like more than anything in the world. She obviously expresses that so much, but I think it's part of the generation, part of the cycle, part of the whatever, that there wasn't a place there for me to confide in.
Yeah.
And so I took it on myself to be an adult from a very young age.
Yeah. And so do you think that played a part in you becoming addicted to marijuana to sort of like numb that sense and the feeling
I think
of not
so.
being enough?
Yeah, definitely. Because it puts a shine on things. So if things are feeling, heavy and depressing and miserable, then it's an escape. It's literally where you go to walk through the wardrobe and go hang out in Narnia for a while if you want. So I'm realizing more and more in later life now that that's what I've been treating it as since I was a teenager.
Yeah.
It's just escaping my situation, trying to escape myself because I had all this self-loathing issues, hated myself, like didn't feel I was worthy of love or any kind of relationships, and just constantly bashing on myself, smoking pot. And then it's kind of a downer as well, which I think is something that I'm really grateful for in myself because of my highly strung kind of nature with all my hyperactivity and my like dyslexia and like struggling to focus a lot. So it has like a medicinal benefit for when I smoke to be able to focus.
Okay.
It helps me stay focused on one thing for a while, and it helps me in a lot of ways. But then it's like anything, it becomes damaging after a while if you stop using a tool the way it's supposed to be used.
And that's, I think, Graham Hancock talks about this as well, one of my favorite authors and one of the world's like foremost historians. He did an interview with Joe Rogan recently where he talks about vaping marijuana, and that's what's helped him. He's used marijuana to write every single book that he's put out because it does allow him to focus. It opens up these channels to creativity that he can't access without it. But he too, like someone creative who uses it specifically for that as a tool, he finds himself getting trapped in this cycle of addiction. So, I can definitely understand why you were using it. And
it becomes a cotton wool. It becomes like a cotton wool blanket.
Yeah.
When things get too much, you can escape, smoke some weed. I even, full disclosure, I smoked crystal meth for the first time when I was 13 years old.
Shit.
Yeah, like just in my only year of high school, I got introduced to ice and smoked it out of, like a light bulb. And I guess I was just spiraling out of control in that time. And there was a huge crossroads in my life at that moment.
I guess like I resonate with your addiction to marijuana for those reasons, because I had the same sort of thing, self-loathing, feeling like a fraud because I was a cheat on my girlfriend at the time, and no one besides my close friend circle knew about it. So I was always perceived as this good guy. But when I closed my eyes to go to sleep at night, I knew I was a pig of a human, and I hated myself for it. And so, in ecstasy, I wouldn't have to feel that. And then over time, it turned into like me selling, and then me selling turned into me having one for breakfast and then having one for smoko, and just become this huge cycle, man. So I definitely get it.
Yeah. So, and how did you go coming out of that?
It was hard. I had to drastically change my environment. I had to cut out alcohol. And I cut it out for about 6 months, like just went cold turkey, because I found that alcohol was like my gateway into ecstasy. Like if I cut out alcohol, then I was like, I would not have any ecstasy at night or on the weekends. So I may still have one like for breakfast or smoko, but then I'm cutting out that whole period of the day where I wouldn't have it.
And how did that affect your mindset and the thought patterns that used to drive you to use that as an escape?
Well, at that time, like, definitely wasn't aware it was escapism. I just thought I enjoyed ecstasy, and I had it. Like, looking back, I think the environment that I was in, it was acceptable, which is sad. So I never really second guessed it. Yeah, it wasn't until I got to a point where I'm like, holy shit, like I'm dealing ecstasy. Like I could go to fucking prison. It wasn't until I got to that point where I was like, oh shit, okay, like I don't like where this is going. I don't like who I'm turning into. Beyond hating myself.
Yeah. It becomes a full or encompassing kind of thing.
Yep.
So it kind of leads on to my next point that I wanted to make about addiction, and that was the thinking, feeling, feedback loop that we get from memorized emotions. And this doesn't just happen to be with substance abuse. It can be with traumatic experiences and our conditioned mindsets and our conditioned beliefs about ourselves, how they become an addiction as well. Because if you using myself for an example, have an upbringing where you were kind of shamed and rejected by women, then when you see a woman, that you're interested in, it becomes a cycle of negativity and insecurity.
Yep.
And even though it's damaging and you don't like it at all, there's this feeling that gets released, and it's our the feeling that's released over so many years becomes a conditioned kind of feeling, and then our bodies, like biochemistry, gets addicted to those hormones of those emotions. In the same way that we get addicted to smoking pot or taking ecstasy over long periods of time with traumatic, and damaging kind of experiences, our body gets used to the feeling of being miserable or hating yourself or beating yourself up or anything that's damaging.
Yeah, but it's the same as you with BMXing.
Yeah. So it becomes our body physiologically, like it goes beyond our our mindset. Like the physiology of our body gets addicted to these feelings. So after a while, if we start to improve our life and we move away from these damaging kind of conditioning in this damaging environment, and we start rising up the energetic scale into a more, like blissful, higher energy, positive environment, like consciously our mindset, we're making these positive decisions to create these new positive actions, but physiologically, like in our body is still addicted to that feeling of negativity, self-loathing, hate, or anger, or whatever it is, frustration that you kind of conditioned in younger life.
You recondition yourself. It's not until you discard that belief and that emotion or that feeling you get from an experience. With that in mind, I wanted to ask, with the way that you were treated as a child, growing up by your mum, did that then, I guess, from that treatment, did you then seek out women who treated you the same because you had that belief and that distrust?
I think unconsciously and indirectly, they all kind of worked out that way.
Yeah.
In a bizarre kind of twist of fate. I've never, every woman that I've ever fully loved and idealized has never loved me back. Okay. And all the women that I kind of love, and all the women that I've ended up in relationships with have kind of, been ones that I've settled for out of comfort and security, rather than being a pursuit of, my true passions or desires.
Yeah. So has there ever been a point where you've been comfortable within yourself, within a relationship? Like feeling like you truly deserve love from a woman that you love?
Yeah, I mean, there has been. I need to acknowledge the women in my life, the relationships that I've had that have, each one's helped me heal a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I think that each one is a process of healing and then breaking down again to realize where you're still broken. Because, we come along this path of healing and, we have a traumatic experience, we break down, and then, if I get into a new relationship, that kind of, you can be open, you can express, you can trust this person to heal, and then you lift yourself up again and become higher and higher in life, and then you build, I call it a scaffold of security.
Yeah.
So we build a scaffold of security around ourselves off of whatever foundations, which is our core beliefs at that time. So we build our scaffold of security, and then if something happens, say in your core beliefs get altered, and the person that you're in love with was one of the foundations that you built your scaffold of security on. If that person kind of rejects you or disappears out of your life, then your whole scaffold of security comes crashing down, and you're left at rock bottom again.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then it becomes a process of, like hitting rock bottom again, looking back over that past lesson and going, wow, okay, I really thought I'd figured it out then, and I'd built this huge scaffold of security around myself, but then all it took was one little element to get taken away, and all my personal security and independence comes crashing down again. I'm left here vulnerable and scared, searching for answers.
Yeah.
And then it becomes a process of building that scaffold of security around yourself again, so you can go out into the world and start being outgoing again, or pursuing your passions, or having enough motivation to exercise, and all those things that make you feel good about yourself.
Have you been able to be, I guess, completely yourself with anyone yet?
Yeah, probably.
Because like what you said when you're growing up is that you had to be this calm, respectful guy who just, bore the brunt of everything that come his way. Have you been able to break out of that mold or that shell?
It's a good question, and I don't think so, Not fully. I think each time my scaffold of security gets collapsed and I hit rock bottom and I'm left wallowing in my own self-loathing, it gives me an opportunity to rebuild again.
Yep.
From a more authentic kind of foundation.
Okay.
So each time I rebuild my sense of self, it's from a more authentic foundation. Cool. So I think that each time I go through this process, I get closer to being my most authentic self. So I think, you know, the person that I am now, that I express to the people around me, is the closest I've ever been to my authentic self.
Yep.
And I'm not ready to put all my eggs in that basket yet, because I've had my fucking scaffold of security collapse too many times.
Okay. Because
I've thought that I was healed. I thought that I was good. You know, I thought I know everything. I am Slade. I am this person. And then something happens and you realize, wait, no, that wasn't authentic. That wasn't really me.
Yeah.
And that's when you come crashing down again.
Yeah. You spoke a little bit, or you touched on a little bit, the self-sabotage. Has that played a part in any of these recent collapses? Because for someone who's for most of their life believed that they deserve to be mistreated, if someone starts treating you really well, you're going to be like, what the fuck? I don't deserve this. I'm not good enough to have this sort of treatment. And so you self-sabotage. And I've done that with my current partner. So I'm interested to know.
Yeah, literally only really warmed up to the concept of self-sabotage in the last, week. I'm not even kidding you. Just a few days ago, I went to the beach and I sat there and I was meditating, and I'm thinking, I'm going, just breaking things down, and I'm like, why do I do something if I know that it's going to take me away from my goal? Why do you do something even though you know it's not going to help you move towards your goal? And I'm thinking, you know, why do I smoke pot? I know it's not going to help me achieve my goals in the long run. Why do I pursue women in unhealthy ways? You know, I know it's not going to help me achieve my goal in the long run. Why do I eat junk food? I know it's not going to help me achieve my goals in the long run. And then I realized that I guess that's kind of almost what the definition of self-sabotage is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's this feeling, it comes back to the memorized emotions again, which is what I like to try and keep relating to, because what the emotions that we have memorized physiologically are going to be the hardest obstacles to overcome, because our physiological body has so much sway over our mind. Because if our body says, I'm craving some weed, and my psychologist gave me a really good analogy the other day. He goes that our feelings are like an elephant, and our mindset is like the rider.
Yeah.
You know? So no matter how well trained our elephant is and how good a rider, if that elephant decides it wants to go rampaging through a city, there's not much people are going to be able to do to stop it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I guess self-sabotage. So with everything that you've been through, the collapses of those scaffolds, like the relationships and you, I guess, seeking relationships in an unhealthy way.
Yeah, so in a lot of ways it's been damaging, and in a lot of ways I've taken all the responsibility upon myself. It's my fault.
Really?
Yeah.
How has that come about? Because that's one of the biggest challenges for anyone facing any struggle. And if you're a human and you say you haven't faced a struggle yet, then you're full of shit. No matter whether it's big or small, you've gone through something which has caused internal conflict. And for most of us, the hardest thing is acknowledging that we are responsible for what it is that we think and feel.
Mm-hmm.
So how have you gone about getting to that point?
Of taking responsibility?
Yes.
Or letting go of some of the responsibility?
Both.
So, yeah, I think it comes from one of my innate personality traits is unrelenting standards. I have like just a ridiculously high ambition and an extremely unrelenting sense of standards for myself and my relationship and my environments.
Cool.
And that's been extremely difficult to, like overcome because like for the last 30 years, it's been unconscious.
Yeah.
So I've unconsciously had, however this personality trait came about, the standards I set for myself are just ridiculously high. And they always have been in school, in life, in relationships, in anything, work, business, pleasure, fitness, health, whatever I set my mind to, I usually make my standards like almost unobtainable. And then when I fail to reach those goals, it's usually turning around on myself because I'm not good enough or I haven't tried hard enough or that I'm just don't have the skill sets to be able to do it.
Yeah.
So I guess it becomes a process of education, and learning. So once I was exposed to the concept of unrelenting standards, I was like, oh, wow, that makes sense, probably can, cut myself a little bit of slack. And then being grateful for what you have done, because it's simple Buddhist philosophy. You can read all the books, you can go to all the meditations, you can read all the literature on Buddhist philosophy. But if you don't understand the one simple concept, then you'll never get it. If you can't appreciate what you already have, you can never expect to appreciate anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's powerful.
So that was a big learning curve to be able to acknowledge the fact that we all have these predispositions in us that make us who we are. And then we also have this sovereignty and control over the decisions that we make and finding a balance between the two, I think, is the ultimate goal, because then you can acknowledge the innate parts of you that drive you to do greatness and then nurture the parts of you that need nurturing and not constantly hound yourself for not achieving things, and being okay with failure, letting go of pride, like pride and ego and identity and all these kind of things tie into this whole conversation as well, I think.
Yeah. So in terms of recovery for you, you've touched on, since we've been talking, that you've been through therapy, you touched on meditation and Buddhism. Can you, how did you find yourself going to therapy? How did that eventuate?
So I guess it comes from my analytical brain. One of the things that I've come to realize about myself that's been, hard for me to overcome a lot of my life is how analytical I am, how I analyze everything. Some people would say they overthink things, or you need to just let go. But I could never let it go. I was like, no, I need to just understand stuff. And it really caused me a lot of suffering, like a lot of suffering, because it was unguided. So, but just having that unsatiable thirst for some kind of coherency about myself and the way that I think and why I do things. And also having this self-loathing, like hating myself for making stupid decisions and then doing stupid things and disappointing myself. And I couldn't live with myself because I'd made these stupid decisions. And I'm like, why do I make stupid decisions? And I'm like, I can't just sit here and wallow in my own pity anymore. So I had to go and talk to someone to figure out why I make stupid decisions.
Yeah. That's awesome. Super self-aware as well, but was there a certain situation or moment that caused you to think in that way?
Yeah, there was. There was a huge breakup. So it was a big breakup. It was, me investing all of my attachment into a relationship, and then building my sense of self around that relationship. And then when that was taken away from me, my whole sense of self, my whole sense of identity, the sense of security that I'd built for myself just collapsed. I had no idea who I was. I hated myself. Really, very low, dark place. And it took a long, long time to be able to come to terms with that fact. And that's when I went and got covered in tattoos. It was after that breakup.
Wow.
Yeah, I went really deeply internally after that breakup. And I was lucky because I was working with a scaffolder who was a Buddhist as well.
Yep.
And he kind of acknowledged my
your pain,
thirst for understanding.
Okay.
And through the pain, So he gave me these tools to go and meditate. He taught me what meditation was. And that was back in 2014. And then, I was hurting so much. I was so miserable. I was depressed. I was just hating myself that I needed an escape. I needed to escape. And, I guess at that point as well, I'd had all this shame on myself about smoking weed because I knew that smoking weed was not going to help me in the long run. So I approached meditation and spirituality with the same kind of ferociousness that I approached BMX or exercise.
Yeah.
And then I set my unrelenting standards to supreme enlightenment. And, then I just sat there in a sense. And, it's been, obviously a long journey since then. But those first couple of insights that I gained through meditation really started this whole journey inwards and the cycles that forecame it.
Cool. So what have you taken out of, for anyone who hasn't tried or gone and done a session with a counsellor, psychologist, a clinical psych, whatever therapist they may choose, if they haven't done that, they haven't done meditation, or they haven't looked into Buddhism, what have you taken from each of those that has positively impacted your life?
All right. The one kind of underlying keynote that I think is the most powerful is the higher self.
Mm-hmm.
The one that you can always turn to when you have no one to turn to. That's beyond all the self-sabotaging thoughts. It's beyond all the limiting beliefs. It's beyond all the ego, pride, identity constructs. All of those things are just ideas. They're really entertaining ideas, and we really get a lot of excitement out of them. And it's all dynamic, and each thing needs to be acknowledged.
Yeah.
So, but in order to entertain these ideas and to enjoy life fully, I think my kind of one thing to take away from that is that there's a part inside you that always knows what's right. And it's always okay.
Yeah.
And I think through all the therapy, all the meditation, all the mindfulness, all the books, all the practices, it's reintroducing yourself to the part of you that is innately okay, and building a relationship with that person, and trusting them, and having faith in yourself, and cultivating that internal relationship.
That's massively important. And with intuition and following intuition, people talk about this gut instinct. That's fucking true, man. We all vibrate at a certain frequency, and you can tell, your body can tell what frequency someone else is vibing at. And that's why we have this sort of intuition. And it's just like a muscle. The more you use it, the more you work it out, the stronger it's going to get. And with meditation, when you're saying that, I had a thought pop into my head that through meditation, we get to find the version of us that's at rest. Because when we're, I guess, in this monkey mind, we're just thinking 24/7. And we get caught up with those thoughts. It's not until we meditate and we learn to cultivate mindfulness that we realize that we can actually be still and be at rest. And that's a problem for a lot of us.
Mm-hmm. And I think a yogi once quoted that, like restfulness in our day-to-day life is more important than sleep.
Yeah.
Like you could sleep for 8 to 12 hours and still wake up exhausted. But you could work a 12-hour shift building scaffolds, go to the gym, train for 2 hours and get like 5 hours sleep and then bounce out of bed the next day.
Yeah.
If you had a restful mind.
Yeah. Well, I think the first time I really encountered this, and I was just like, what the fuck, how's that even possible, is that my daughter's mum, her parents, they meditate, they don't sleep.
Sorry to tell me to laugh, but that's cool.
Yeah, like they'll legit meditate for about 10 hours, 8 to 10 hours every day, just sitting up.
Yeah. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And
powerful.
One thing I want to ask about your mum, knowing everything that you've been through with her growing up, and then I guess carrying that on into relationships, and it's awesome to hear that you've got this scaffold of security that you're constantly building up as a more authentic you every time. Have you been able to forgive your mum for the way that you were treated?
Yes and no.
Either
I think
forgive or relinquish, like any feeling of resentment.
Yeah. I think on a lot of levels I have. Definitely superficially. I forgive her, and then like really, like genuinely, I sympathize with her because I feel like it's not her fault. It was how she was raised.
Yeah.
And her environment kind of produced that situation. So I forgive her in that sense that I don't take it personally. It's not like it wasn't a personal attack on me.
Yeah.
That's just how it was.
I feel like for people who are progressing, who are bettering themselves, in trying to attain that higher version of themselves, that enlightenment or self-actualization, it becomes easier and easier to forgive someone or to relinquish that resentment the closer you get to self-actualization, because then you're not harboring this resentment for, look at what you've done to me.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas once you're comfortable enough within yourself and you feel good enough, it's easy to look at someone else with empathy and go, oh, fuck, okay, that's the reason you act the way you do. That's the reason you are the way you are.
Yeah.
I'm going to show you love for that, because that must have been hard.
That's right. It's totally correct. That it's so profound. And one of the most important things I think that we can do is, forgiveness, as well as self-forgiveness and forgiveness for others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I seen this in my father, and when I was a kid, his father went to prison when he was born, and so he had a stepdad, and his stepdad used to beat his mum, and if my dad didn't chop the wood good enough as like a 10-year-old, if he didn't chop the wood well enough or didn't mow the lawn well enough, he'd get chained up in the garage and hit with a stick until he pissed and shit himself, and his stepdad would just leave him out there. And I couldn't understand my dad forgiving this man on his deathbed. But it's not until I've got to this point now where I can look back and say, oh, fuck, that was an opportunity for him to heal, rather than saying what you did to me was okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's important that you bring up that concept of healing in regards to forgiveness as well. Because as we, rise up the energetic scales, as you're saying, moving towards being a more sovereign, kind of independent, soul or being, we face everything with opportunity to learn from it. So, and the more mindful you are of yourself and your environment, the more you can realize that every single situation around you, past, present, or future, and how you react to it, it's a reflection of yourself.
Yeah.
So anything in your environment that's bringing up kind of feelings inside here that make you want to project out onto that person, well, if you just stop there and ask yourself, okay, so what's this feeling calling out for attention for inside me before it gets the chance to be projected? So it's acknowledging the fact that no one or no thing can make you feel a certain way, that it's something from within you that needs attention.
Yeah. Yeah. You allow yourself to feel that way by not having the self-awareness to first become aware of it, acknowledge it, and then work through it.
Exactly.
And I listened to a book from Mark Manson. It's called Everything is Fucked, and he talks about...
Oh, yeah, I heard about that book, eh?
He talks about the only reason you're able to pick up bad traits, bad behavior in others is because it's either been something that you've exhibited yourself or something that's still a part of you.
Yeah.
And once you understand that, you can show someone else a little bit of empathy for treating you less than well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it'd be so liberating to be able to just, indulge in that kind of philosophy freely without, having to work so hard on the process, which I think is still a process at this stage.
Yeah.
But just to imagine what it'd be like just to never get pissed off, just to be chill, go out to whatever, go to a club, no one can affect you. It's whatever, bliss. But then there's also, we have that animal, beast inside of us as well that has its place, where does the animalistic kind of beast mode come into it?
Yeah. Oh, I mean, the lion doesn't need to prove it's a lion. When it's hungry, it goes on the fucking hunt.
Yeah. True.
And when it wants to rest, it rests. And that's just what we've got to surrender to.
And then there's all these constructs about identity and belief systems about ourselves and others that sway the way we interact with different situations.
Yeah.
I need to act a certain way while I'm out here, or what does this person think about me? Just imagining a life of no kind of constructs like that, where we were just free to express ourselves in whatever way that may be, healthily in the moment.
Yeah, and we don't have to, it doesn't have to just be an imagination. As long as you take the time to ask yourself the question, why do I feel like I need someone else's acceptance? Why am I feeling like I'm not good enough? Then at least you can work back throughout your life, go through all the events, situations that you've been through, look at the stories that you've created to instill this belief that you're not enough, work through that shit. And once you work through it, once you become comfortable enough within yourself, no one else's opinion is going to matter. Yeah, sometimes it may pop up, but then you return to being aligned and being comfortable in who you actually are.
Yeah. That's a beautiful sentiment, and very well said too.
Thanks.
No worries. And I love that. And that's kind of what I'm here for. I want to experience that kind of sovereignty, that freedom, that bliss. And I feel like it's almost fleeting.
Yeah.
I've experienced before. I've been at the height of, my own kind of energy and abilities and mindfulness, and I feel like obtaining it or learning it, because I guess the goal here is not to obtain or anything really.
Yeah.
But to experience it in all of its awe and beauty, the liberation of self into a free expression of your true authenticity, irrespective of circumstance, irrespective of consequence, even in the face of certain death, to remain authentic and, calm in that state of peacefulness and joy. But then how to maintain this is the question. Can it be maintained? Is it even healthy to maintain it?
Yeah, and I think the more authentic you become and the more true you stay to being authentic and genuine, like you're going to create an environment, people and surroundings that vibrate at that level as well, so you're no longer going to have to put on a front with certain people because all the people around you are content with you just being you being authentic.
Yeah.
And so you're no longer going to have to worry about fitting in or anything like that.
Yeah, no, that's still a big one for me, I think, is, fitting in, being accepted, and putting on fronts and shows, because I'm a performer,
Yep.
It's kind of what I do, and it's part of me, and I have a couple of different personas that like to come out every now and then. And, I enjoy that.
But I think creative release is, if that's something that you enjoy, that's something that you should tap into. It's never something that should be judged.
And the most entertaining creative release are the ones that is the most authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't have to try, then you can just express your truth. Then we can be at the doorway of something, revolutionary.
Yeah.
Like world changing.
It's awesome, bro. I've got a couple questions before we wrap up.
Cool.
Knowing everything that you've been through the wars, and you're still working through it at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
What are you most grateful for right now?
I got asked this question the other day, and I've got a very nice answer. I am the most grateful for potential.
Yeah.
The potential is what I'm grateful for. Because at the moment, I'm at the doorway of a new cycle, new life, new me, new whatever you want to put it.
Yep.
But the potential is just almost, it's scary, it's terrifying, So do I have what it takes to rise up to that potential?
You do.
That's the question.
You do.
Can I dig deep enough to find it and cultivate that? But at the moment, I am just so grateful for everything I have around me because it creates potential. I have this beautiful home where I don't have to strive for very much. I've got a recording studio right here, which I don't have to strive for very much. Everything's just around here. The opportunities to create an empire or some kind of legacy is right here. And I think that is what makes me inspired, rather than having to define my gratitude down to a fixed point.
That's awesome. It's you being grateful for what you have right now.
Yeah.
My man.
Yeah.
Last question. If you had the chance to put a message on a billboard that thousands of people would see every day, what would that message be?
Aha! I know exactly what it would be. This came to me in my meditation the other morning.
Yes.
It goes, what does it all mean? How far do you want to take it?
Explain.
What does it all mean? How far do you want to take it? You've got to ask yourself that question. Whenever you get stuck in a difficult life situation, what does it all mean? I guess is the introspection phase that we have to go through to learn who we are and what's it all about. Okay, so once you've spent however long it takes going through the introspection phase to learn who you are, what you stand for, what you want to do the most in life, then the question you can only ask yourself is, how far do you want to take it? Because that answer will determine how early you get up in the morning. It'll determine the attitudes that you cultivate and the mindset that you try to stay strong with.
That's awesome, bro.
Yeah.
I'm going to wrap it up now because I'm going to run out of space.
All good, brother. No worries.
Just want to acknowledge you for taking time to do this, bro. For letting your true self out while we shoot the shit on this.
Thanks, man. I feel like I opened up a little bit there, but yeah, just a tad.
Good on you, bro. You have a good day, eh?
Thanks for having me, Lockie. Peace.
Later, Bolt.
Open up.